going? Hello, everyone. I do, in fact, hate my voice. How goes it? How goes it? I hope you're having a good time while I break something. How's everyone doing today? You're doing well, I'd imagine. Or not, I don't know. Yeah, everything's fine. Just you're doing very fine. That's good. I'm glad. Now, how bad am I gonna lag? We'll find out. But hi, it's been a few days. Is the audio okay? I'd hope so. I don't wanna mess with it. Leave us alone to mess things up, you know? Why am I rising? Why am I rising this early? I didn't even have chance to do anything and I'm already rising people. Is that all I am to you? I look so sad. Oh goodness me. Goodness me. Ay Dios mío. Good day, everyone. Oh, Lord. Well, shit. I don't like being put on the spot. um, I'm only making you do that because I hydrate from Scott. I actually have two bottles of water next to me, sir. Because I'm going to be reading, and with reading comes dead throat. So, yeah. 25 stream streak, let's go. Good job. But yes, I hope that my audio is okay as I spaz the fuck out because that's what I do best. Ah, shit. Um, well, shit. I don't have one off the top of my head, and I don't know what to do because everything I do is unoriginal. Are you a triangle? Because you can bend me 45 degrees. I don't know. That's all you're getting. That's all you're getting. I don't know. God. My bad, everyone. You know, like the triangles. You bending, acute triangles, 45 degrees. Come on, do some math rotation. Would you rather bend me over at a 90-degree angle? Anyway. My bad. Oh god. My stream dies with that being my last thing. I'm gonna be so pissed. Oh god, we didn't even get to read yet. Already just hitting the fan. God damn it. It's all Shadow's fault. You're going to enjoy the cringe math and you're gonna accept it. That's what we do best. Oh, goodness me. I hope oh, fucking damn it. Yes, I'll stretch. God. It's almost like y'all want me to take care of myself or something. Now may I read this German word that I'm probably not going to pronounce right? We done with the redeems now, yeah? We're good? We're good now? You're gonna be good? You're gonna be a little good for me? Lord have mercy on my soul. I need this to go up just a tiny bit. There we go. How is the audio? Is the audio fine? Do we need to turn it up, down, what have you? Want to make sure it's good before I start reading. Someone's gonna make me shut up. And I do a pretty fucking good job of it. I'm doing pretty okay. I mean, look at me. God, I need to chill. We're going to read, I'm gonna butcher this, and I'm so sorry. For any Germans in the chat, I'm so sorry. Elijah, something like that. And the will therein lieth, which dieth not, who knoweth the mysteries of will with its vigor. For God is but a great will, pervading all things by nature of its intentness. Man doth not yield himself to angels, nor unto death utterly, save only through the weakness of his feeble will. Neat quote from Joseph Glanville. I cannot for my soul remember how, when, or even precisely where I first became acquainted with Lady Ligeia. Long years have since elapsed, and my memory is feeble through much suffering. Or perhaps I cannot now bring these points to mind, because in truth the character of my beloved, her rare learning, her singular yet placid cast of beauty, and the thrilling and enthralling eloquence of her low musical language made their way into my heart by paces so steadily and stealthily progressive that they have been unnoticed and unknown. Yet I believe that I met her first and most frequently in some large, old, decaying city near the Rhine. Of her family, I surely heard her speak. That it is of a remotely ancient date cannot be doubted. They're going to say this word a lot, and I'm going to mispronounce it every time, just going different ones. Ligeia. Buried in the studies of a nature more than all else adapted to deaden the impressions of the outward world. It is by that sweet world. Oh, hi. How are you doing? We're reading a story called Ligeia, or Ligeia. That I bring before mine eyes in fancy the image of her who is no more. And now, while I write, a recollection flashes upon me that I never known the paternal name of her who was my friend and my betrothed. Thank you for the lurk, darling. And who became the partner of my studies and finally the wife of my bosom. Was it a playful charge on the part of my Ligeia, or was it a test of strength of my affection? That I should institute no inquiries upon this point. Or was it rather a caprice of my own? A wildly romantic offering on the shrine of the most passionate devotion? I but indistinctly recall the fact itself. What wonder that I have utterly forgotten in the circumstances which originated or attended it. And indeed, if ever that spirit which is entitled romance, if ever she, the wan and the misty-winged Ashtafet of idolatrous Egypt, Lord, presided, as they tell, over marriages ill-omened, the most surely she presided over mine. There is one dear topic, however, on which my memory fails me not. It is the person of Ligaya. Thank you for the subscription, Shadows. You are the best. Thank you so much, darling. Oh, I've been bonked. And I look like I'm getting absolutely railed. Yay! Thank you, thank you. In stature, she was tall, somewhat slender, and in her latter days, even emaciated. I would in vain attempt to portray the majesty, the quiet ease of her demeanor, or the incomprehensible lightness and elasticity of her footfall. She came and departed as a shadow. I was never made aware of her entrance into my closed study save by the dear music of her low, sweet voice, as she placed her marble hand upon my shoulder. In beauty of the face no maiden ever equaled her. It was the radiance of an opium dream, an airy and spirit-lifting vision, more wildly of an opium dream, more divine than the fantasies which hovered about the slumbering souls of the daughters of Delos. Yet her features were not that regular mold. I love that cat. Which you have been falsely taught to worship in the classical labors of the heathen. There is no exquisite beauty, says Bacon Lord Verulam, speaking truly of all the forms and genre of beauty, without some strangeness in proportion. Yet I saw the features of Ligaya were not of a classic regularity. Although I perceived that her loveliness was indeed exquisite, and felt that there was much of strangeness parading it, yet I tried in vain to detect the irregularity and to trace my own perception of the strange. I examined the contour of the lofty and pale forehead. It was faultless. How cold, indeed, that word when applied to a majesty so divine. The skin rivaling the purest ivory, the commanding extent and repose, and gentle prominence of the regions above the temples. And then the raven black, the glossy, the luxuriant, and naturally curling tresses setting forth the full force of the Homeric epithet, hyacinthine. I looked at the delicate outlines of the nose, and nowhere but in the graceful medallions of the Hebrews had I beheld a similar perfection. There were the same luxurious smoothness of surface, the same scarcely perceptible tendency to aquiline, the same harmonious, sleek, curved nostrils, speaking the free pit spirit. I regarded the sweet mouth. Here was indeed the triumph of all things heavenly, the magnificent turn of the short upper lip, the soft, voluptuous slumber of the under, the dimples which sported, and the color which spoke. The teeth glancing back with a brilliance almost startling, every ray of holy light which fell upon them in her serene and placid, yet almost exultingly radiant of all smiles. I scrutinized the formation of the chin, and here too I found the gentleness of breadth, the softness and the majesty, the fullness and spirituality of the Greek, the contour which the god Apollo revealed but in a dream to Cleomenes, the son of the Athenian, and I peered into the large dreams and eyes of Ligeia. There's a cat. Yes, we love cats. For her eyes, we have no models, and the remotely antique it may have been too, that in their eyes of my beloved lies secret to Lord Verlam alludes. They were, I must believe, far larger than the ordinary eyes of our own race. They were even fuller than the fullest of the gazelle eyes of the tribe of the valley of Norjot. Yet it was only at intervals, in the moments of intense excitement, that this peculiarity, Lord have mercy, became more than slightly noticeable in Ligeia. And at such moments was her beauty. In my heated fancy thus it appeared perhaps the beauty of beings either above or apart from the earth, the beauty of the fabulous houri of the Turk. The hue of the oars were most brilliant black, and far over them hung jetty lashes of great length, the brows, slightly irregular to the outline, had the same tint. The strangeness, however, which I found in the eyes, was a nature distinct from the formation or the color or the brilliancy of the features, and must after all be referred to as the expression. Ah, word of no meaning, behind whose vast latitude of mere sound we entrench our ignorance of so much of the spiritual, the expression of the eyes of Ligeia. How for long hours I have pondered upon it. How have I, through the whole of a midsummer night, struggled to fathom it. What was it? As something more profound than the well of the Democritus, which laid far within the pupils of my beloved. What was it? I was possessed with a passion to discover. Those eyes, those large, those shining, those divine orbs. They became to me the twin stars of Leda, and I to them devoutest of astrologers. There is no point among the many incomprehensible anomalies of the science of mind more thrillingly exciting than the fact, never I believed noticed in schools, that in our endeavors to recall the memory of something long forgotten, we often found ourselves on the very urge of remembrance, without being able, in the end, to remember. And thus how frequently in my intense scrutiny of Ligeia's eyes have I felt approaching the full knowledge of their expression. Felt it approaching, yet not quite be mine. and so at length entirely depart. And strange, oh strangest memory of all, I found, in the commonest objects of the universe, a circle of analogies to the expression. I mean to say that subsequently to the period when the Gaia's beauty passed into my spirit, their dwelling as in a shrine, I derived from many existences in the material world a sentiment such as I felt always aroused within me by her large and luminous orbs. Yet not the more I could divine that sentiment, or analyze, or even steadily view it, I recognized it, let me repeat, sometimes in the survey of a rapidly growing vine, in the contemplation of a moth, a butterfly, a chrysalis, a stream of running water. I have felt it in the ocean, in the falling of a meteor. I have felt it in glances of unusually aged people, and there are one or two stars in heaven, one especially a star of the 6th magnitude, double and changeable, to be near the large star in Lyra, in telescopic scrutiny of which I had been made aware of the feeling. Hello, Crazy. How you doing, sweetie? I have been filled by it by certain sounds from stringed instruments, and not unfrequently by passages from books. Among innumerable other instances, I well remember something in the volume of Joseph Glanville, which, perhaps merely from quaintness who shall say, never failed to inspire me with the sentiment. And thee will therein lieth, which dieth not, who knoweth the mysteries of the will, with his vigor. For God is but a great and pervading all things by nature of its intentness. Man doth not yield him to angels, nor unto death utterly, save only the weakness of his feeble will. I'm doing all right. I'm glad you're doing well too. Length of years and the subsequent reflection have enabled me to trace indeed some remote connection between this passage in the English moralist and a portion of the character of Ligeia. An intensity in thought, action, or speech was possibly in her a result of, or at least an index, of that gigantic volition which during our intercourse failed to give other and more immediate evidence of its existence. Of all the women whom I have ever known, she, the outwardly calm and ever placid Ligeia, was the most violently a prey to tumultuous vultures of stern passion, and of such I could form no estimate save by the miraculous expansion of those eyes, which at once so delighted and appalled me, by the almost magical melody, modulation, distinctness, and placidity, very low voice, and by the fierce energy rendered doubly effective by the contrast with her manner of utterance, of the wild words which she habitually uttered. I have spoken of the learning of Ligeia. It was immense, such as I have never known in a woman. In the classical tongues was deeply proficient, as far as my own acquaintance extended in regard to the modern dialects of Europe. I have never known her at fault, indeed, upon any theme of the most admired, because simply the most abstruse of the boasted erudition of the Academy have I ever found Ligeria fault. How singularly, how thrillingly, this one point in nature of my life had forced itself, at this late period, only upon my attention. I said her knowledge was such as I have never known in a woman. But where breathes the man who has traversed successfully all the wild areas of moral, physical, and mathematical science? I saw not then what I now clearly perceive, that the acquisitions of Ligeia were gigantic, were astounding, yet I was sufficiently aware of her infinite supremacy to resign myself, with a childlike confidence, to her guidance, through the chaotic world of metaphysical investigation at which I most busily occupied during the earlier years of our marriage. With how vast a triumph, with how vivid a delight, with how much of all that is ethereal in hope did I feel, as she bent over me in studies but little sought, but less known, that delicious vista, by slow degrees expanding before me, down whose long, gorgeous, and all untrodden path I might at length pass onward to the goal of wisdom too divinely precious not to be forbidden. How pungent, then, must have been the grief with which, after some years, I beheld my well-grounded expectations take wings to themselves and fly away. Without Ligeia, I was but a child, groping benighted. Her presence, her readings alone, rendered vividly luminous the many mysteries of the transcendentalism in which we were immersed. Wanting the radiant luster of her eyes, letters, lambent and golden, grew duller in the Saturnian land. And now those eyes shone less and less frequently upon the pages over which I pored. Ligeia grew ill. The wilds blazed with the too glorious effulgence. Effulgence. The pale fingers became the transparent waxen hue of the grave, and the blue veins upon the lofty forehead swelled and sank impetuously with the tides of the most gentle emotion. I saw that she must die, and I struggled desperately in spirit with the grim Azrael. And the studies of the passionate wife were, to my astonishment, even more energetic than my own. There had been much in her stern nature to impress me with the belief that to her death would have come without its terrors, but not so. Words are impotent to convey any idea of the fierce resistance with which she wrestled with the shadow. I groaned in anguish at the pitiable spectacle. I would have soothed, I would have reasoned, but in the intensity of her wild desire for life, solace and reason were alike the uttermost of folly. Yet not until the last instance, amid the most convulsive writhings of her fierce spirit, was shaken to the external placidity of her demeanor. Her voice grew more gentle, grew more low. Yet I would not wish to dwell upon the wild meanings of the quietly uttered words. My brain reeled and hearkened entrance to a melody more than mortal, to assumptions and aspirations which mortality had never known before. That she loved me, I should not have doubted. And I might have been so easily aware that, in a bosom such as hers, love would have reigned no ordinary passion. But in this only was I fully impressed with the strength of her affection. For long hours, detaining my hand, would she pour out before me the overflowing of a heart whose more than passion devotion amounted to idolatry. How had I deserved to be blessed by such confessions? How had I deserved to be so cursed with the removal of my beloved in the hour of her making them? But this subject I cannot bear to dilate. I may say only that in the day of love, more than womanly abandonment to a love, alas, all unmerited, all unworthily bestowed, I at length recognized the principle of her longing was so wildly earnest a desire for life, which was now fleeing so rapidly away. It is this wild longing, it is this eager vehemence of desire for life, but for life I have no power to betray, no utterance capable of expressing. At high noon of the night in which she departed, beckoning me peremptorily to her side, she bade me repeat certain verses composed by herself not many days before. I obeyed her, and they were these. Lo, 'tis a gala night, within the lonesome latter years, an angel-thronged, bewinged bedlight, in veils drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes, in the form of God on high, mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly. Thank you for the check-in, Kiva. Mere puppets they, who come and go at thy bidding, of vast, formless things, that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from their condor wings invisible well. That motley drama, oh be sure, it shall not be forgot with its phasm chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that returneth to the same spot. That scared me. Hello. Welcome in, Arachne. And much of the madness and the morse of sin, the horror, the soul of the plot. Oh, but see, amid the mimic root, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that rides out from its scenic solitude. It writhes with the mortal pangs. The mimes become its food, and the seraphs sob at vermin fangs. And the human gore imbued, out are the lights, out all. And over each quivering form, the curtain of funeral pall, come down with a rush of a storm. And the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. Oh God, half shrieked Ligaya, leaping to her feet and extending her arms aloft with spasmodic movement. As I made an end of these lines, O God, O Divine Father, shall these things be undeviatingly so? Shall this conqueror be not once conquered? Are we not part of and parcel in thee, who knoweth the mysteries of the will with its vigor? Man doth not yield him to the angels, nor unto death utterly, save only through the weakness of his feeble will. And now, as if exhausted with emotion, she suffered white arms to fall, and returned solemnly to her bed of death. And as she breathed her last sighs, there came mingled with them a low murmur from her lips. I bent them to my ear, and distinguished again the concluding words of the passage in Glanville. Man doth not yield him to the angels, nor unto death utterly, save only through the weakness of his feeble will. She died, and I, crushed into the very dust with sorrow, could no longer endure the lonely desolation of my dwelling in the dim and decaying city of Rhine. I had no lack of what the world calls wealth. The Gaia had bought me far more, very far more than ordinary falls to the lots of mortals. After a few months, therefore, of weary and aimless wandering, I purchased and put in some repair an abbey, which I shall not name, in one of the wildest and least frequented portions of the fair England. The gloom and dreary grandeur of the building, the almost savage aspect of the domain, the many melancholy and time-honored memories connected with both, had much in unison with the feeling of utter abandonment which had driven me into that remote, unsocial region of the country. Yet, although the external abbey was within its verdant decay of hanging about, it suffered but little alteration. I gave way with a childlike perversity, and perchance, and with a faint hope of alleviating my sorrows, to a display of more than regal magnificence within. For such follies, even in childhood, I imbued a taste, and now they came back to me as if in the dotage of grief. Alas, I feel now much even of the incipient madness that might have discovered in the gorgeous and fantastic draperies, in the solemn carvings of Egypt, in the wild cornices and furniture, in the bedlam patterns of the carpets of tufted gold. I had become a bounden slave, and in the trammels of opium, and my labors and my odors had taken a coloring from my dreams. But these absurdities I must not pause to detail. Let me speak only of that one chamber, ever accursed, whither, in the moment of mental alienation, as I led from the altar as my bride, as successor of the unforgotten Ligeia, the fair and blue-eyed lady Rowena Trevian of Tremon. There is no individual portion of the architecture and decoration of that bridal chamber which is not now visibly before me, where the soul of the haughty family of the bride, when, through the thirst of gold, they permitted to pass the threshold of apartment, so beckoned, a maiden and daughter so beloved. I have said that I minutely remember the details of the chamber, yet I am sadly forgetful on topics of deep moment, and there was no system, no keeping the fantastic display to take hold upon the memory. The room lay in a high turret of the Castelled Abbey, was pentagonal in shape, and the of capacious size, occupying the whole southern face of the Pentagon was a sole window, an immense sheet of unbroken glass from Venice, a single pane, and tinted of a leaden hue, so that the rays either sun or moon passing through it fell with a ghastly luster upon the objects within. Over the upper portion of this huge window extended the trellis work of an aged vine, which clambered up the massy wall of turret. The ceiling, the gloomy-looking oak, was excessively lofty, vaulted, and elaborately fretted with the wildest and the most grotesque specimens of a semi-Gothic, semi-Druidical device. From over the most central recess of the melancholy vaulting depended by the single chain of gold with long links, and a huge censer of the same metal, Saracenic pattern, and with many perforations so contrived that there writhed in and out of them, as if endued with a serpent vitality, a continued succession of party-colored fires. Some few ottomans and golden candelabra of Eastern figure were in various stations about, and there was the couch too, the bridal couch of an Indian model, and low and sculptured of solid ebony, with the pall-like canopy above. In each of the angles of the chamber stood on end a gigantic sarcophagus of black granite from the tombs of the kings over against Luxor, with their aged lids full of immemorial sculpture. But in the draping of the apartment lay, alas, the chief fantasy of all. The lofty walls, gigantic in height, even unproportionately so, were hung to submit to foot in vast folds with a heavy and massive-looking tapestry of a material which was found alike on carpet floor as a covering for the ottomans and ebony bed. Good lord, this story's long. How long is this story actually? I got 4 pages left. This story's been going on for an hour. Ottomans and the ebony bed as the canopy for the bed, and as the gorgeous volutes of the curtains which particularly shaded the window. The material was the richest cloth of gold. It was spotted over at irregular intervals with brass figures about a foot in diameter, and wrought upon the cloth in patterns of the most jetty black. But these figures partook in true character of the arabesque only when regarded from the single point of view, by a contrivance now common and indeed untraceable to a very remote period of antiquity. They were made changeable in aspect. To one entertaining room they bore the appearance of simple monstrosities, but upon further advance, this appearance gradually departed, and step by step, as a visitor moved his station in the chamber, he saw himself surrounded by an endless succession of the ghastly forms which belonged to the superstition of Norman, or arise in the guilty slumbers of the monk. The phantasmagoric effect was vastly heightened by the artificial introduction of the strong, continual current of the wind behind the draperies, giving a hideous and uneasy animation to the whole. In the halls of all these in the bridal chamber such as this, I passed, with the lady of Tremaine, the unhallowed hours of the first month of our marriage, passed them with but a little disquietude, that my wife dreaded the fierce moodiness of my temper, that she shunned me and loved me but little. I could not help perceiving, but it gave me rather pleasure than otherwise. I loathed her with a hatred belonging more to a demon than a man. My memory flew back. Oh, with what intensity I regret. To Ligeia, the beloved, the august, the beautiful, the entombed. I reveled in collections of her purity, of her wisdom, of her lofty, her ethereal nature, of her passionate, of her wisdom, of her idolatrous love. Now then, did my spirit fully freely burn with more than all the fires of her own, in the excitement of my opium dreams, for which I habitually fettered, in the shackles of the drug, I would call aloud her name during the silence of the night, or among the sheltered recesses of the glens by day, as if through the wild eagerness, the solemn passion, consuming ardor of my longing for the departed, I could simply restore her to her pathway she had which abandoned. Ah, could it be forever? About the commencement of the second month of the marriage, the Lady Rowena was attacked by sudden illness, from which her recovery was slow. The fever consumed her, rendered her nights uneasy, and in her perturbed state of half-slumber she spoke of sounds, of motions in and about the chamber of the turret. Which I concluded had no origin save in the distemper of her fancy, or perhaps in the phantasmagoric influences of the chamber itself. She became at length convalescent, well, finally, yet but a brief period elapsed, ere a second move, more violent disorder again, threw her upon the bed of suffering, and from this attack her frame, at all times feeble, never altogether recovered. Her illnesses were, after this epoch, of alarming character and of more alarming recurrence, defying alike the knowledge and the great exertions of her physicians, with the increase of the chronic disease which had thus apparently taken too sure a hold upon her constitution to be eradicated by human means. I could not fail to observe a similar increase in the nervous irritation of her temperament, and her excitability by trivial causes of fear. She spoke again, and now more frequently and peremptoriously, of the sounds, the slight sounds, and of the unusual movements among the tapestries of which she formerly alluded. One night, near the closing in of September, she pressed this distressing subject with more than usual emphasis upon my attention. She had just awakened from an unquiet slumber, and I had been watching with feelings half of anxiety, half of vague terror, the workings of her emaciated countenance. I sat by the side of her ebony bed upon one of the ottomans of India. She partially arose and spoke in an earnest low whisper of sounds which she then heard, but which I could not hear, of motions which she then saw, but then I could not perceive. The wind was rushing hurriedly behind the tapestries as I wished to show her what, let me confess, I could not all believe, and those almost inarticulate breathings, and those very gentle variations of the figures upon the walls, were but the unnatural effect of the customary rushing of the wind. But a deadly pallor, overspreading her face, had proved me that my exertions to reassure her would be fruitless. She appeared to be fainting, and no attendants were within call. I remembered where was deposited a decanter of light wine, which had been ordered by her physicians, and hastened across the border to procure it. But as I stepped beneath the light of the censer, two circumstances of a startling nature attracted my attention. I had felt that some palpable, although invisible, object had passed lightly by my person, and I saw that there lay upon the golden carpet, the very middle of the rich luster, thrown from the center, a shadow, a faint indefinite shadow of angelic aspect, such as might be fancied by shadows of a spade. But I was wild with excitement of the immoderate dose of opium, and heeded those things but little, nor spoke to them to Rowena. Having found the wine, I recrossed the chambers, and poured out a gobletful, which I held to the lips of the fainting lady. She had now partially recovered, however, and took the vessel herself, while I sank upon an ottoman near me, with my eyes fastened upon her person. It was then that I became distinctly aware of a gentle footfall upon the carpet, and near the couch, and in a second thereafter, as Rowena was in the act of raising wine to her lips, I saw, or may have saw, something I dreamed, fall within the goblet, as if some invisible spring in the atmosphere in the room. 3 or 4 large drops of a brilliant ruby-colored fluid. If this I saw, not so Rowena. She swallowed the wine unhesitatingly, and I spoke to her of a circumstance which must, after all, I considered, have been just a suggestion of vivid imagination, rendered morbidly active by that terror of the lady, by the opium, and by the hour. This man is a drug addict. The opium's winning. Yet I cannot conceal it from my own perception that immediate subsequent of the fall of the ruby drops, a rapid for the worse that took place in the disorder of my wife, so that on the 3rd subsequent night, the hands of her menials prepared her for the tomb, and on the 4th I sat alone with her shrouded body in that fantastic chamber which had received her as my bride. Wild visions, opium engendered, flitted shadow-like before me. I gazed with an unquiet eye upon the sarcophagi in the angles of the room, of the varying figures of the drapery, upon the writhing of the party-covered fires in the censer overhead. My eyes then fell. I called to mind circumstances of a former night, to the spot beneath the glare of the censer where I had seen faint traces of the shadow. It was there, however, no longer, and breathing with greater freedom, that I turned my glances to the pallid and rigid figure upon the bed. Then rushed upon me 1,000 memories of Ligeia, and then came up upon my heart with the turbulent violence of the flood. The whole of that unutterable woe with which I had regarded her thus enshrouded, the night waned, and still, with a bosom full of bitter thoughts, the only one supremely beloved. No, it's fine. Oh God, we have to stretch stuff. This is one long-ass story, though. It's a good story, though. It might have been midnight, or perhaps earlier or later, for I had taken no note of time, when a sob, low, gentle, but very distinct, had taken no more Lord have mercy. I jumped. No. A sob, low, gentle, but very distinct, startled me from my reverie. I felt that it came from the bed of the ebony, the bed of death. No shrimping. But why? I listened in an agony of superstitious terror, but there was no repetition of the sound. I strained my vision to detect any emotion in the corpse, but there was not the slightest perceptible. Yet I could not have been deceived. I had heard the noise, however faint, and my soul was awakened within me. I resolutely and perseveringly kept my attention riveted upon the body. Jesus. Yet I could not have been deceived. I had heard the noise, however faint, and my soul was awakened within me. I resolutely and perseveringly kept my attention riveted upon the body. Many minutes elapsed before any circumstances occurred, tending to throw light upon the mystery. At length, it became evident that a slight, very feeble, and barely noticeable tinge of color had flushed within the cheeks and along the sunken small veins of the eyelids. Through the species of unutterable horror and awe, for which the language of mortality has no sufficiently energetic expression, I felt my heart cease to beat, my limbs grow rigid where I sat. Yet a sense of duty finally operated to restore my self-possession. I could no longer doubt that we had been precipitate with our preparations, that Rowena lived. It was necessary that some immediate exertion had be made. Yet the turret was altogether apart from the portion of the abbey tenanted by the servants. There were none within call. I had no means of summoning them to my aid without leaving the room for many minutes, and this I could not venture nor do. I therefore struggled alone in my endeavors to call back the spirit still hovering. In a short period, it was certain, however, that a relapse had taken place. The color disappeared from both eyelid and cheek, leaving the wanness even more than that of marble. Oh goodness, my kitty. Hold on, guys. I gotta get my cat. Christ. Come on, crazy. Come on, crazy kitty. Come on, crazy kitty. Thank you. You gonna come say hi? You gonna come say hi, kitty? I have lost my place, but I am not rereading this whole thing. At length, before it became evident that a slight, barely noticeable tinge of color had flushed within the cheeks, along the sunken small of the eyelids. That's not it. It was, that one. I therefore struggled alone in my endeavors to call back the spirit still hovering. In a short period, it was certain, however, that a relapse had taken place. The color disappeared from both eyelid and cheek, leaving a whiteness even more than that of marble. The lips became doubtly shriveled and pinched up in the ghastly expression of death. A repulsive clamminess and coldness overspread rapidly the surface of the body, and all the usual rigorous stiffness immediately supervened. I fell back with a shudder, and upon the couch from where I'd been startlingly aroused, and again gave myself up to passionate, waking visions of Gaia. Jesus Christ. An hour thus elapsed. Could it be possible? I was a second time aware of some vague sound issuing from the region of the bed. I listened in extremity of horror. The sound came again. It was a sigh, rushing to the corpse. I was distinctly a tremor upon the lips. In a minute afterwards, they relaxed, disclosing a bright line of pearly teeth. Amazement now struggled in my bosom with the profound awe which hitherto reigned there alone. I felt that my vision grew dim and my reason waned, and it was only by a violent effort that I at length succeeded in nerving myself to the task which the duty thus once more had pointed out. There was now a partial glow upon the forehead and upon the cheek and throat. A perceptible warmth pervaded the whole frame. There was even a slight pulsation at the heart. The lady lived, and with redoubled ardor I betook myself to the task of restoration. I chafed and bathed the temples and hands, and used every exertion which experience with no little medical reading could suggest. But in vain. Suddenly, the color fled, the pulsation ceased, the lips resumed the expression of the dead, and in an instant afterwards the whole body took upon itself an icy chilliness. The livid hue, the intense rigidity, the sunken outline, and the loathsome peculiarities of that which has been for many days a tenant of the tomb. And then again I sunk into visions of the Gaia, again and again. What a marvel that I shudder while I write again. There reached my ears a low sob from the region of the ebony bed, but why shall I minutely detail the unspeakable horrors of that night? Why should I pause to relate time after time, until the end of a period of the great dawn, this hideous drama of revivification was repeated? How each terrific relapse was only into a sterner and apparently more irredeemable death. How each agony wore the aspect of struggle with some invisible foe, and how the struggle was succeeded by I know not what the wild change in the personal appearance of the corpse. Let me hurry to the conclusion. The greater part of the fearful night had worn away, and she who had died once again stirred, and now more vigorously than hitherto, although arousing from a dissolution more appalling than its other hopelessness than any. I had long ceased to struggle or to move, to remain sitting rigidly upon the ottoman, a helpless prey to a whirl of violent emotions, of extreme awe, and perhaps the least terrible, the least consuming, the corpse. I repeated, stirred up, now more vigorously than before. The hues of life flushed up into unwonted energy, into a countenance. The limbs relaxed, save the eyelids were yet pressed heavily together, and that bandages and draperies of the grave still imparted their charnel character to his figure. I might have dreamed that Rowena had indeed shaken off utterly the fetters of death, but if this idea was not even then altogether adopted, I could at least doubt no longer when arising from the bed, tottering with feeble steps, with closed eyes, and with the manner of one bewildered in a dream. The thing that was enshrouded advanced bodily, impalpably, into the middle of the apartment. I trembled not, I stirred not, for a crowd of unutterable fancies connected with the air. The stature, the demeanor of the figure rushing hurriedly through my brain had paralyzed, had chilled me into stone. I stirred not, but gazed upon the apparition. There was a mad disorder in my thoughts, a tumult unappeasable. Could it be? A living Rowena confronted me. Could it indeed be Rowena at all? The fair-haired and blue-eyed Lady Rowena Davignon of Tremaine? Why should I doubt it? The bandage lay heavily about the mouth, but then it might not be the mouth of the breathing Lady of Tremaine. In the cheeks there were roses, as in the noon of her life. Yes, these might be the fair cheeks of the living Lady of Tremaine, and the chin with its dimples, as in health, might it not be hers? But had she then grown taller since her milady? What inexpressible madness seized me with that thought? One bound, and I had reached her feet. Shrinking from my touch, she let it fall from her head, unloosened the ghastly cerements which had confined it, and there streamed forth into the rushing atmosphere of the chamber huge masses of long disheveled hair. It was blacker than any raven wings of midnight, and now slowly opened the eyes of the figure which stood before me. Here then at last I shrieked aloud. Can I never be mistaken? These the full and the black and the wild eyes of my lost love, of the Lady Ligaya. Christ Almighty. And on that note, I am ending stream here because that was a long story and I was not expecting 30 pages. Lots of love, everyone. I hope y'all all have a good day. I'm just going to end stream because, yeah. Lots of love to all of you. Love you all very much. Rest up, everybody. Or something. Goodbye, everyone.